Hello, I'm Awurakua Amissah, and welcome to this presentation, which is based on my MSc dissertation at Bangor University. It is titled From Trauma to Violence, because that's a journey many people take without ever choosing it. Today, I'll be walking you through the research I carried out on domestic abuse recurrence, why it happens, how systems fail to stop it, and what we can do to change that. This is a story not just about harm, but about silence, structure, and the power of prevention. Let me begin by sharing why this topic matters to me. Domestic abuse is often thought of as a one-time event. For many survivors, it's not. It's a recurring cycle, a pattern, and that pattern doesn't happen by accident. It happens because of trauma, control, and the failure of the systems meant to protect us. This project was about turning that lens back around, not just asking what abuse looks like, but asking why it keeps happening even after we claim to intervene. So that leads me to the main focus of this research. My core research question was, why does domestic abuse recur in adult relationships? And alongside that, what roles do the systems, which are legal, psychological, and social, play in either enabling or preventing this recurrence? This wasn't just a psychological question, it was a systems question. And I wanted to approach it with both structure and empathy. To answer that question, I took a careful, evidence-based approach. I conducted a systematic literature review using PRISMA 2020 guidelines. I screened over 3,600 academic sources from psychology, criminology, and law. After applying strict inclusion criteria and using the spider tool, I narrowed it down to 15 peer-reviewed studies that directly examined recurrence in domestic abuse. I then analyzed using thematic analysis to look for patterns, and what I found were 6 clear consistent themes. And it's here, in these 6 themes, that the deeper story began to unfold. The 6 major drivers of recurrence in domestic abuse I identified were substance use, psychological traits, socioeconomic pressure, coercive control, repeat offending, and legal barriers. Each theme reflects not only a risk factor, but also a missed opportunity for intervention. Let's begin with the first theme, the role of substance in perpetrating abuse. Substance use doesn't cause abuse, but it absolutely fuels it. Gilchrist et al. 2023 found strong links between alcohol and drug use and the recurrence of domestic violence. Substance use reduces inhibition and intensifies aggression, especially when combined with unresolved trauma or emotional instability. What struck me most was how often perpetrators blamed alcohol or drugs as an excuse. The pattern of abuse often started before the substance use began and continued after it ended. This tells us that addiction is not the root of the cause, but a co-pilot in a larger system of control. Now, beneath that surface, we see another key driver, psychological vulnerability. Emotional dysregulation was common among perpetrators. That means they struggle to manage intense feelings, like anger, shame, or fear, without lashing out. McKay et al. 2018 found a strong connection between this and early trauma, specifically childhood abuse and neglect. Alongside this, many showed signs of insecure attachment, which is a relationship style marked with the fear of abandonment or power boundaries. This often manifests in controlling behavior, jealousy, and reactive aggression. It's important to note these traits don't excuse abuse, but they do show us where therapeutic interventions can begin before abuse becomes repeated harm. But even when emotional risk is high, many victims might still stay. But often, the reason is simple. They can't afford to leave. Socioeconomic pressure is one of the most powerful enablers of recurring abuse. Fahmy and Williamson 2018 showed how poverty, unemployment, and housing insecurities trap victims in unsafe environments. This isn't about weakness, it's about survival. Abusers often use money, housing, or employment as tools of control. Victims are told, if you leave, you lose everything. And in many cases, that's not a threat, it's a fact. During the COVID-19 pandemic, stress rose, resources disappeared, and abuse soared. Scarcity doesn't just expose systems, it accelerates their failure. And sometimes there's no violence at all. No bruises, no marks. Just control. Quiet, constant, invisible. That brings us to coercive control. Coercive control is not about injury, it's about domination. It's the isolation, the monitoring, the surveillance, and the gaslighting. It's one of the strongest predictors of future violence. Michael and Hall, 2019, found coercive control was more predictive of homicide than physical violence. That's how serious this is. What makes it hard to detect is that it's cumulative. One restriction here, one insult there, one "I'm just checking in on you" text turns into 87 messages a day. It's terrifying, and it's often invisible. And now, technology has amplified it. Spyware, GPS tracking, hacked accounts. The relationship might end, but the control doesn't. With that, let's shift from victims to perpetrators, because understanding repeat offenders is essential to real prevention. Some people stop after one incident, others don't. Recidivism basically means repeated abuse over time. It was the major theme. Hajmato et al. 2023 used police records and machine learning to identify common perpetrator profiles. They found denial of responsibility, strategic manipulation, entitlement, and then resistance to intervention. These are not isolated acts, they're habits, reinforced by culture, silence, and systems that don't hold people accountable. But here's the part that feels most urgent and most frustrating. Even when survivors reach out for help, the system itself often fails them. In many countries, coercive control is still not criminalized. Even where it is, proving it is near impossible. Douglas et al. 2019 found that Without physical evidence, most survivors are dismissed. And for those who are marginalized, the barriers multiple. Language, fear of retaliation, lack of representation, all these make justice less accessible. The system isn't broken. It was built this way. And we have to start by admitting that. To make sense of all these layers, I drew on 4 theoretical frameworks to guide my analysis. As I said, to make sense of the layers, which are trauma, control, failure, and silence, I grounded my analysis in 4 theoretical frameworks. These weren't just academic add-ons. They help me understand why these patterns exist and how they continue. So with that, we're going to begin with the routine activity theory by Cohen and Felsen, 1979. This theory says harm occurs when 3 things align: a motivated offender, a vulnerable target, and no one to intervene. This was powerful in helping me understand how domestic abuse thrives in private, behind closed doors, where there's no one, no guardian, no bystander, no social service, no neighbor to intervene. Abuse has space to repeat. This theory helped me see that opportunity is as much a risk factor as trauma or control. And in many cases, survivors weren't just vulnerable, they were unseen. And now we move to the next theory, the general theory of crime, by Picurio et al., 2002. This theory links repeated violence to low self-control, especially emotional regulation. It helped me make sense of the psychological profiles I kept seeing in the data. People who responded to frustration with aggression, who lacked impulse control, who escalated quickly under stress. This theory helped explain why the same people often reoffend, and why interventions that only focus on the external act without working on emotional regulation fail to stop it. And now, with the feminist criminology by Crenshaw, 1991. Feminist criminology reminded me that abuse isn't neutral. Power is always at play. It helped me read the data through an intersectional lens. Why women were believed less when they were poor, disabled, or of another race. Or why coercive control was downplayed as relationship drama. Why the law protects some survivors but not others. Feminist theory didn't just name the patterns, it named the bias behind the patterns. Resistance theory by Bottoms et al., 2004. This theory looks at how people stop committing crime. It helped me explore something that data often implied but didn't always say, that real change is possible, but not through punishment alone. This theory told me that transformation comes when people see themselves differently, when they find belonging, identity, and accountability, not just consequences. This shaped my recommendations not just around what stops abuse in the moment, but what can stop it from returning. So now, what do we do with all this knowledge? How do we move from awareness to action? Bold, multi-phased actions. Here's what I recommend. Expand legal definitions to include coercive control and digital abuse. Mandate trauma-informed training for frontline workers such as police, GPs, and housing staff. Invest in early interventions in schools, family courts, and shelters. Create risk-based rehabilitation programs tailored to repeat offenders. Embed survivor advisory boards into police decisions. And finally, adopt intersectional risk assessments that consider race, gender, disability, and socioeconomic status. This is not about fixing victims, it's about fixing the system. And that brings me to what I believe is the heart of this work. And this comes down to my final reflection. Domestic abuse doesn't come out of nowhere. It's not random, it's not rare. It's patterned, it's predictable, and that means it's preventable. But if only we're willing to name it, track it, fund it, and believe in it. Prevention is not soft, it's radical. It says you will not wait for bruises. You will not wait for broken bones. We will listen before it's too late. Because trauma doesn't have to become violent, but if we ignore it, it will. And with that, thank you so much for listening. Thank you for witnessing, and I hope this isn't the end of this conversation, but rather the beginning of something new. If you have any questions, reflections, or thoughts you'd like to share, I'm open to them now. I welcome the opportunity to continue this dialogue, whether it's about research, the systems we've discussed, or the way we can work towards safer futures together. Thank you very much.